Welcome to Built-in CV.
Welcome to Built-in CV with Daniel H. Brumer, founder of CV Business Law. Daniel is a California business attorney who advises entrepreneurs, operators, family businesses, and growing companies on contracts, business decisions, real estate matters, and outside general counsel needs. I'm Shameika Rhymes, and today we're talking about when a small business actually needs a lawyer and how business owners can recognize the point where legal guidance becomes more than just a nice thing to have. Welcome back, Daniel.
Thanks. Good to be here with you again.
Well, Daniel, what kinds of business decisions become much harder to unwind once they are made without legal input?
Well, interestingly, it's usually the decisions that are made right at the outset of the business formations that are hard to unwind after the business starts, because it really starts with formation and choosing the right way to hold the ownership of your business, and also the discussions and the agreements to have with your partners in the business. So it's really something that upfront, doesn't need necessarily in-depth legal counsel. It doesn't need you to spend a lot of money on attorneys, but having those discussions up front are really the most important times to have it to protect against things that may go wrong down the line. Unfortunately, a lot of the times I find, or I get introduced to people who have waited and, wait until something does go wrong, at which point it is maybe not impossible, but a bit more difficult to unwind. So anytime you're starting the business, entering into some kind of partnership or venture is really critical to have those discussions. And another point at which it's really important to have those discussions is when you start hiring employees, especially here in California. It's really, really important to make sure that all of your I's are dotted and T's are crossed when it comes to compliance with your employment obligations as an employer. So that is another critical time to have a discussion with an attorney, and those decisions are often the harder ones to unwind and the more expensive mistakes that people make as they go through their journey.
Daniel, I'm curious. So is this when a business plan would come in place, and do the business owners bring you the business plan when they come to see you?
Business owners often bring me a business plan when they come to see me because, again, my services are a lot more holistic. And once I get into a client's business, I'm really there for almost every aspect of it. And so clients who I've represented for a while, who are starting a new business will come to me with their business plan because they know that over the years we've developed a relationship where I'm not just a legal advisor, somebody telling them what not to do. I really become a trusted advisor and a voice of business reasoning and good decision making, not necessarily because I'm smarter than the average bear, but more so because of my experience having represented businesses for so many years and having seen a lot of different things that they go through. I've developed a pretty good knowledge base over the years and have, again, become more of a business counselor as much as I am a lawyer and legal advisor.
Okay. So at what point does putting agreements in writing stop feeling like another option for a growing business?
Any lawyer will tell you always have every agreement in writing, uh, no exceptions. Again, when you're starting a new business, you'll oftentimes find yourself in a place where things are just moving so fast or something slips through the cracks and maybe you don't get something in writing. And that's not fatal. We can talk about contract law in a lot of depth and as to, when oral contracts are binding. But at the end of the day, it is always best practice to have things in writing. It's really just most critical that if a question ever arises or if there is ever a dispute about the nature of that agreement, you want something in writing that a decision maker, be it a judge or a jury or someone else, will be able to understand what the intent of the parties really was when they entered into that contract. So having those agreements in writing is really, really critical. Another interesting point about things being in writing is oftentimes uh, people don't realize that things that they do say in writing, whether it's over email or over text, um, can actually be used to form a binding legal contract. And so, what I often have to advise clients, sometimes after it's a little too late, is you really need to be cautious about what you're saying on emails and text messages that could at some point be construed as you're having entered into a binding legal agreement, even though there may not be a formal contract set in front of you that you sign on the table. Contracts can be formed in so many ways. So it's important to have things in writing, and it's important to be careful what you're saying in writing that could be construed as a written agreement.
I think that is so interesting because I was going to ask about that. And then, sometimes people just say, oh, let's just shake on it. And that's sounds like that is not the way to go about things. And it brings to mind an entrepreneur where I live that passed away. And at her funeral, someone came and said, oh, well, she promised me that I could provide this for her business, but there was nothing in writing. That was a handshake agreement.
Yeah, and there's a really fine line to walk. And anecdotally, you'll come across people who will say that they operated a business on a handshake for so many years, and I've done that before myself, and a lot of times it works out, and maybe it's just luck. Um, but at the same time, you don't want to go overboard on the things that you put in writing. You don't want to overwhelm your business partners or your vendors or your customers with onerous agreements, because that can foster a little bit of mistrust too. I think Warren Buffett said something along the lines of if he can't fit his contract into a certain number of pages, he doesn't want to do the deal. Because there's got to be that sense of trust between the parties in that relationship. Obviously, things need to be in writing to get the critical aspects of the deal documented. But sometimes when we're trying to overcompensate and put too many things in writing or overdraft a document, that can sometimes sour a business relationship too. So it's a pretty fine line to walk, especially in startup companies and small and mid-sized businesses.
What conversation should happen early when people are building a business together around shared ownership, shared work, and shared money?
Another important discussion to have really is a discussion about potential exits. Every business owner is rightfully focused on getting the business off the ground. And a lot of times the conversation about, well, what happens when the business is successful and we decide we want to either maybe do something different, or if one party wants to sell the business and the other one doesn't. What is the off ramp? What is the exit strategy? And how are we going to create mechanisms where if we do have a difference of opinion or a disagreement about the future path of the business, how are we going to resolve that between each other?
What creates more problems in business partnerships? Unclear expectations, uneven workloads, ownership questions, or something else entirely?
I think it's a combination of all the things that you mentioned, and it probably stems from, again, not having those discussions up front and really thinking about the long-term trajectory of the business and where you expect it to be in the future. It's real easy to shake hands on how we're going to operate and form a business today. And oftentimes that's all we have, right? We're just bootstrapping a new business. But without thinking about those more complex questions for the future, you're setting yourself up for problems when the business inevitably, we hope, ends up succeeding and you have a lot of critical decisions to make with your business partners.
What kinds of week to week business questions start showing owners they may need ongoing counsel instead of occasional legal help?
Uh, Usually it comes in the form of contracts that are coming up over and over, depending on their type of business, you may be presented with a lot of vendor contracts or a lot of other contracts that you need to deal with that you just, when you don't have the right counsel, you're just signing papers as they're put in front of you. But after a while, you start to take a step back and think, well, what am I signing and what am I getting myself into?
So, what if a business owner has a partner and then there's a third party that wants to buy in, or however you may word that, um, and they come to you? What do you tell them?
Well, it depends how that third party is going to be entering the business, and I usually see it in a couple of different ways. It's either somebody who's coming in who wants to invest money into the business, and then you have questions about, how is that money returned? Is there any interest on that money? What is the role of that investor going to be? Um, and the other way I see it sometimes is when people want to give an employee um, ownership in a business, right? You have a great employee who's going to be doing a lot of great work for you and you want to reward them. And especially with smaller businesses, a lot of times you can't reward them what they deserve in cash right away. And so people sometimes want to reward their employees with ownership. And it also creates an incentive for the employees to work even harder if they have an ownership interest in the business. But a critical mistake that I see happening in those circumstances is an owner giving an employee an ownership stake in the business without enough um, strings attached, so to speak, that an employee who's just given ownership of a business without conditions could leave that business the next day and still take their ownership with them. And I've seen that happen. And then when investors are looking at that business in the future and they see people who have this ownership stake but aren't contributing actively to the business, it starts to raise questions. And so what I advise owners to do anytime they're bringing on um, an employee or a consultant as an owner is to really make sure that giving them that ownership stake is tied to their staying with the business for a certain amount of time and being productive, contributing members for a certain amount of time so that you don't run into a problem of somebody potentially freeloading or free riding on other people's work.
Well, as we wrap up, what are a few signs that a business has reached the point where operating without legal counsel is actually becoming risky?
Well, unfortunately, the first sign is when something goes bad and they realize, had we had a contract in place or had we had proper employment policies in place, we could have avoided that problem. It is what it is. And again, business owners don't always have the luxury of retaining counsel and doing everything exactly the right way as things are starting up. It's just the nature of being a small business owner. Sometimes you just have to fly by the seat of your pants and um, you know, work as hard as you can and hope things end up for the best. Um, but that's really where I see it is, things start going wrong and we learn from our mistakes and the business owner will say, you know what, last time I realized I needed a contract for that particular issue and I didn't sign a contract and we had problems. And so this time I know that there is a need for a contract. So unfortunately, it's, learning from mistakes a lot of the time. Good business owners, once they even see the possibility for trouble in the future, they're wise enough to retain counsel and help guide them through what they're going through.
Well, Daniel, this has been another informative conversation about when a small business actually needs a lawyer in Coachella Valley. So thank you for breaking this down for us today.
Thank you very much. Great conversation.
Well, that is it for today's episode of Built in CV with Daniel H. Brumer. If you'd like to learn more about Daniel and CV business law, visit cvbusinesslaw.com. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to leave a review, and subscribe to the show so you don't miss the next episode.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.